Welcome to the Rant Live.
Welcome, everyone, to the Rant Live. Today is Tuesday, March 22nd. Spring training is underway. I've already been to 2 games now. And, man, it's good to be back, that's for sure. And it's like normal. They don't have, we usually sit on the berm out in the outfield. And they don't have remember the white
Yeah, they had the circles.
Where you
had to stay in your little pod. Yeah.
And it was like, it was always weird because, obviously the pandemic and everything around it was new and weird. But you never really, like you didn't want to go out of your circle. But every once in a while, someone you were sitting next to did go out of their circle. And it was just kind of like, you didn't really know what to do. Just sit there and watch baseball was usually the best thing to do. But
well, and I remember being out there and I just, I'd buy a beer and then I would just nurse my beer because you didn't have to wear your mask provided you're actively eating or drinking. And, and it's like, I mean, there was no one within 20 feet, right? Like it was when you and I went to the game and it was actually the game where Ortega hit the walk-off grand slam, I believe. Maybe it was the one before that. We went to 2 games, I think. And it wasn't very, it was only 25% capacity at the time anyway. And so you're out there and those circles are like, there's a good 10 feet between them anyway. And they're also staggered. And so I'm like, there's no one within 20 feet to my left, 20 feet in front of me or behind me. I'm like, what are we even doing here, man? We're outside, whatever. So I'm like, I'm just going to hold this old style can and keep it by my face the whole time, not to like be a jerk, but I was like, all right, at what point, have we really gone so far that it really doesn't matter? But it was kind of
they really were enforcing it too. I mean, they would walk around and kind of give you the dirty look and tell you to put the mask up if you didn't have it on. And yeah, I mean, looking back on it, obviously I feel like we've come kind of quite a ways from the initial days of like you can't leave your house to where we are now, which is pretty much feels like it's an endemic versus the pandemic that it was and being afraid that we were all going to die type of thing.
Well, and hopefully
and I'm glad,
and I know there's a lot, there's a lot of stuff. I feel good about the steps that have been taken, and I mean, and here, one thing, it's back to normal when the plane tickets are super expensive to get back out to Phoenix in March, and when you cannot get a rental car. Those are all gone. Not that I necessarily need, but I was looking at one because I thought, I haven't traveled for a while, but a lot of that stuff, it accumulates and you get frequent flyer points and things like that, and frequent, member points or whatever. And so I've used that with Hertz before to get really good deals on, like, we were in Hawaii and I rented a convertible, like a convertible Mercedes for, next to nothing. Like I had to pay the tax and stuff on it, right? So I'm like, maybe I can do something like, no, I can't even get an economy car out there, which is fine because I can just, I'm hanging out with you. I'll make you chauffeur me, or I'll get an Uber, right?
It's probably better to get an Uber anyways.
Well, yeah, your driving is pretty scary. It is. But but yeah, in most of those cases, it is really, if you talk about like, and here's how spoiled I am because I never really rented a car on my own. I've done it through work. And when you do that through work, first of all, you don't pay for it anyway, but corporations have accounts and it's way, way cheaper, right? And you're not paying all the extra insurance and all that stuff. It was a rude awakening for me when I went to rent a car the first time on my own. I was like, holy shit, this is expensive. Like, of course I'd rather Uber, especially if it means, what you mean? I don't have to use my own GPS and figure out where the hell I'm going and worry about parking and all that. I can just have this person drop me off. Yeah, man. We're going to do that all day. So,
yeah,
we
do have a parking pass, so at least going to spring training,
there's that.
We have the parking pass, and that's mighty convenient.
That is the one good thing about being there, though. I will say this: 25% capacity meant 0 lines to get in and out from the parking lot, no lines for beer, nothing. It was just like no lines in the bathroom. Like that, you could get a little spoiled by that, I think. And as someone who's a bit I don't want to say I'm, maybe I go from introvert to extrovert after a few beers, but if I can kind of avoid, I'm a bit misanthropic. So if I can avoid large crowds of people at times and not have to deal with other human beings, it's actually kind of nice at times. But it was one of the coolest things. And one of the things that I most enjoyed was like, hey, Club 400 would have their tailgate tent set up. You could go over there. They'd either have a keg or a big trash can filled with cans of beer and ice. And you just go over there and hang out with some people that you knew, either who you've met through the years. And
that's still going on, by the way. I was just there yesterday.
Good. It still is. As long as they're still having that, man, then that's going to be pretty cool.
They're there.
Good. And watching the players come down, through the
and they're doing that now.
Now
they really weren't doing that as much last year.
Yeah.
And then like Chris Bryant and like Javi and all, like Anthony and all the bigger players,
right?
They
zip by on the golf cart
around the back.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't even see them go by. And that's really not happening anymore. All the players now are walking down. And so, yeah, it's much.
Nobody knows any of them. So they don't have to get them out like, who's number 84?
98. Who's
this guy?
Yeah, there's some high numbers walking around over at Sloan Park.
Which is, but I'm excited for that. I want to, I'm hopeful that there's some minor league action going on back there to check out and just, again, I'm just excited to be out there for a few days. It's a longer trip than what I typically take. So sorry to you for that, but no,
I think we'll survive.
Yeah, probably it'll be fine. I think. But no, I'm just really, really stoked for it. And I've got my shoes packed. I had to coordinate to make sure I have the right shoes to be able to wear for games. I did. I was going to go see the Rockies play just because of KB. But then based on some things, as we were discussing the other day, timing wise, so we're actually going to go catch the Cubs play at the Padres. And I ended up, even though StubHub remains a nemesis and it is painful to me to pay those extra fees, I do have seats on the first row behind home plate, but next to the Cubs dugout. So like row A right there, which I thought would be pretty cool, see the guys as they're coming up and getting, in the on deck circle and all that. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to go, may as well do it up. I got my son with me and we can have a little fun with that. And bonus, it's possible. And even though I was just joking about it, Megan Montemurro from the Chicago Tribune replied to my tweet. And Seiya Suzuki may be making his Cubs debut on Friday when I'm out there.
Yeah.
So,
Wednesday, it's probably you would think
it'll be a home game.
Probably happen at Sloan.
Yep. And the next two are Wednesday or Friday. Is probably the next two.
Friday feels kind of more of a natural fit there, right?
Friday feels like a good debut day, right? Like that feels like a good one.
Friday.
And
I will tell you though, different from how Sloan Park was when COVID or last year, whatever you want to call it, there were so many people Saturday at the game. You mentioned the Friday game is like Saturday was insane. There were so many people there. Like it's been so long since there's been that many people there.
Yeah.
And they're doing this new cashless system at Sloan Park.
Yeah.
And so it was the first time that they, rolled this out at Sloan Park with that many people there, especially. And it was just the systems weren't working. I don't know if the internet wasn't working properly or it was really, really slow. And the lines were enormous. Like they were crazy. And so I went yesterday and it was a lot better. There weren't nearly as many people there, obviously, but it was much better. And yeah, as you mentioned, that was the one thing where they had 25% capacity last year. It was just, you never had a line. You never had to worry about anything. It was nice. It was weird. But so it was nice.
Do they have tap to pay? Because if they have tap, tap is like the easiest thing. Like once that started getting implemented, I was loving that because I went to a few games. The Indianapolis Indians game. It's like just boop done. I was like, oh man, that's a hell of a lot easier than swiping or inserting the chip or especially cash. So provided it works well. But you know what else I'm excited for is that Friday they're playing the Rockies, which is the return of Christopher Lee Bryant to Sloan Park. So if we're talking about a Chris Bryant,
you think he'll be in a Rockies uniform or a Giants uniform?
Well, it depends on whether the Rockies PR. Speaking of which, is it something about the Rockies? Because you sent me the tweet. The Padres referred to them as Denver. I mean, they are from Denver. That's where they're located, but they sure as hell aren't in Denver now, nor are they the Denver Rockies. They're the Colorado Rockies. And then when they announced Bryant, they just had a purple background. He's still wearing Giants. Like, you can't do a jersey swap on the guy. Like,
I know I saw Carlos Correa today in a Twins uniform. Yeah, on the field, like during the game.
Seiya Suzuki's in a Cubs uniform and the stuff that they put out. You know, I mean, again, that
seems basic.
We've come a long way, man. Graphic design is my passion. Let's go. But if we get a Chris Bryant return and a Seiya Suzuki debut, that would be a really fun time. And then, you know, I'm pumped because on next Monday we're gonna get to see, knock wood, Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. So that should be a lot of. That's what I'm excited for with spring training. Even though you know those guys will be in there for a couple innings, but hopefully we've gotten to the point where it's more than like one at bat and 2 innings for a starter. So it should be. They're in their second go round on the rotation now.
So let's see. The Angels game. We're going to the Angels game. That's Thursday. Just FYI.
Monday. Not Angels Cubs. Here. It's just not Angels Cubs. Angels A's.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Well, we should definitely look into. Don't mind us, everyone who's listening. We're just making our weekend plans. But we should definitely look into going to the Cubs play the Angels on Thursday at 1:10.
Right, that I will miss because I will be in the air.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I think I might go to that. We'll see.
That's what I was. Well, that's what I was so bummed about. I was like, son of a bitch. Of course they're playing. Because that would have been like Shohei Ohtani is my son's favorite player.
Yeah.
And he's got his Ohtani Japan jersey. All this and a Showtime shirt and all this stuff. And so I was like, well, we can't go out there and not. And so I was like, well, crap. Of course we'll miss him. And like can't very well move the flight up to first thing in the morning, mostly because if I did, he wouldn't be coming with me. So yeah, the timing is not ideal, but get to see him anyway. So that's that. But that's part of the fun about spring training too, is just kind of like the vibe. Yeah. Whoa. Okay. We playing like Frogger or something?
That's my my phone makes this 80s kind of video game noise.
But yeah, no, it'll be good. I'm looking forward to it. And seeing some of these, and there is something to be said for as much as we don't know, but having followed the minors a lot more closely, just as a function of this role, and then having gotten to know a lot of those guys, like I do get excited for seeing some of these players who we might not otherwise get to see much of. I do try to get out to some minor league games and see some of the Cubs affiliates. But this is a chance to catch those guys, even if it's just so much as like walking down the walkway and getting a late at bat in a game or whatever. But that part's kind of cool too, and getting to see them kind of wear the Cubs uniform and to whatever extent kind of experience a little bit more of their dream, especially the guys who are youngest. And you get to see Owen Casey and some of these guys who are just coming up through the system, Ed Howard and that. So yeah, I'm very, very stoked for that. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's getting to finally be to where it's like, okay, we think most of the transactions are pretty much done. I still think the Cubs have there's gotta be something going on, and I'll be
they've got like 50 pitchers, so
yeah,
they're set there.
They could have a full roster of pitchers alone and then another one just with middle infielders. So yeah, exactly. Something, although but here's the thing, and I wrote about this, and I was like, and I think we talked about this last. Like, there's got to be something big in the works because they have so many players right now that are supposed to be on the roster, and some of them they haven't officially made moves yet. But one of those we saw was Stephen Brault, who was supposed to have been getting a guaranteed deal, then apparently has some kind of an injury. It's like, oh, actually, it's a minor league deal. And so you wonder how many of those, like, are they going to restructure? And we saw. We've seen stuff like that too. So does that happen with a few of these? Are some of these cheap enough that that'll be, what a buzzkill will that be if it's like at the end of it they just end up DFAing a few guys and restructuring a contract to get back under the 40-man limit, and there's not actually a move that takes place to actually do something, which is, boy, that would be anticlimactic.
And it does feel like it's heading in that direction, to be honest with you. I mean, it's going to have to be jet alone because Tom Ricketts is on an airplane heading to London probably as we speak, or maybe he's there already trying to make a bid on Chelsea, which we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, it seems like it's kind of, there hasn't been a big bang. And I saw, I think it was on Bleacher Nation, how Brett had mentioned that the Cubs had spent the 5th most in baseball. But that's, if you don't have a team, you have to get a team.
That was the biggest thing.
The team,
yeah,
you have to spend the money for the players. I mean, if you're starting at 0, spending the 5th most or first most,
first most,
it's I don't think that's necessarily relevant, to be honest with you. I think they had to spend money. I mean, they didn't break the bank. There's no doubt about that. But I don't know. I just think that, it kind of is what it is. They fielded what appears to be a team that is, has the ability to reach 500, I guess, but maybe we'll see.
Yeah, possibly by default.
Barring injuries.
Right. Well, that was kind of the thing is like, they're going to spend money because they have to. They just traded away how many players, and had how many other guys have their contracts expire, whether they were 1-year deals, especially bullpen guys and other bench players. So it's like they're going to have to spend money just to fill the roster because they only had 3 guys on guaranteed deals.
Yeah,
right.
That's
so
exactly what they've done.
Yeah, and that, but part of it here's what's troublesome. I think I saw somebody point this out too, and I believe it was in response to that tweet that Brett had sent or Michael or whomever. I mean, it was Bleacher Nation, but and I'm saying that not to be like, oh, Bleacher Nation, it sounds demeaning almost the way I did it, or like pejorative, but I'm doing that in case you want to go check the tweet, and this is where it's out there just to confirm. But a lot of this is coming from like they're giving these deals to dudes where you're like, wait, that guy got a guarantee. Wait, this has got to be a minor league deal, right? Oh, like when I first wrote up the Brault stuff, which we actually had, and I could have put something out on that, like a full 12 hours, I think, before it happened, maybe. But it's one of those where the source didn't want to. It's like they didn't want to be outed or what. Not that it would have been told like, oh, it's this person, but you know what I mean. Anyway, those things sometimes happen. But I was like, okay, this is definitely a minor league deal. I mean, this is a dude that the Pirates DFA'd, right? Like, if the Pirates DFA you, there's no way another team is going to give you a guaranteed major league deal. When it comes out as guaranteed, I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, what? Andrelton Simmons is another one. I'm like, dude, he's a guaranteed deal for him. Like, that just for the role that he should be playing. That again feels like another. So there are a few of those guys from like, oh boy, okay, I can get a major league deal, but like, $5.5 million for this dude, $6 million for this guy. So I guess what I'm saying is it feels, that's the worrisome part, is it feels like they're not just filling the roster, which is necessary, but they're doing it with somewhat inflated salaries, relatively speaking. Jan Gomes is another one. I'm kind of surprised he got as much as he did, to where you're like, it's like you had extra money that you had to spend, and if you don't, you lose it. So you're just saying, well, we'll just inflate these contracts a little bit, and then it looks like we're spending a lot of money, even though we really don't intend. And they're short-term deals, which they said they were going to do. I just figured we'd be looking more at Stroman type things where they had a higher AAV than projected over a shorter period, rather than
overpaying,
paying a dude $6 million instead of $4 million. Or something like that, that. So we'll see where that goes. But maybe that's Tom Ricketts spending some money to make it look like he's spending money, while they're preparing a $4 billion bid for an English soccer team.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see what happens there. But I would say just assessing the Cubs offseason moves in general, I don't care how much money they spent. I really think that's irrelevant. I think if you look at the quality of the moves that they made, there's nothing really that jumps off the table at me. I mean, it's so hard to be objective with this stuff. I feel like, which I guess we're not objective. We're not meant to be objective, right? But obviously the Stroman signing is great, but that Stroman signing is great if you had a pitcher like Yu Darvish on the team, or if you then signed a pitcher like Yu Darvish or somebody that had a power arm like that. Just Stroman alone isn't really all that exciting. I mean, he's a cool guy. It's fun and all that. I'm sure he's going to be a good pitcher. He is a good pitcher. But it's just like the totality of the moves that the Cubs made were just pretty anticlimactic. I would say, if I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, based on my expectations going into this season, I'd say it was like a 3. I think it could have been worse, I suppose, because if they didn't sign Suzuki or Stroman, then it would have been like a 2.
Oh, that would be abysmal if that
or 1 maybe.
Yeah, I think a one might even, a 2 might be generous.
Yeah, that might have had to have been negative at that point. So it's just, I don't know. I don't feel very inspired by what they did, but I do think that what they did helps you see kind of what they feel about the system, the minor league system, the players that are in that minor league system, and how they're at least hoping that those players are going to develop. So if those players don't develop the way that they hope they will, then we're going to have some issues, some big issues.
Yeah, I think that, to say the least. I think it's one of these deals too, where you talk about, hey, the Cubs spent some money, and that's good, but like I said, part of that's because they had to, right? They had to because they had David Bodie, who's out till June anyway, with the shoulder surgery. Jason Hayward and Kyle Hendricks were the only guaranteed contracts they had left, and then and Wilson Contreras is under, but the only long-term actual contract, like Contreras is still on his rookie deal, right? So that's it. I mean, they had Happ and some other guys, again, ARB eligible or pre-ARB players, but as far as actual contracts, you're looking at it going, well, they damn well better spend actually more money, relatively speaking, than other clubs, just because they have to fill their roster and they have to replace a bunch of starters, right? Everyday type players. Now, at the same time, did they spend enough money? That's the question. And I think, to me, the answer is a definitive no in that regard. I mean, we were talking about really adding 2 impact type players. Like, I mean, Wade Miley is another one, but here's what's funny, right? Every one of these moves, if we were to remove a lot of the negative context that we have around the team, which I know is, and I don't want to do that for the sake of cherry picking, but I'm going to say, like, there's definitely ways we could look at everything they've done, right? But if you look at the Miley pickup, is like, okay, initially, within the context of what we knew that Hoyer wanted to add a bunch of hard-throwing pitchers. Well, you go sign a guy who throws slower than everybody else, they picked him off waivers, and it's like $10 million. You're thinking, okay, well, this definitely signals that they're willing to spend a lot more money, because this guy doesn't at all fit the needs of what they have, but they're willing to.
Yeah, so you're thinking they're going to have to go out.
And then they get Stroman, and you're like, okay, well, this is only a 2 or maybe a 3-year deal, so they have to add, because that means they want to open the and people say, window. Some people say windows shouldn't exist, whatever, but they want to open up their competitiveness immediately within these 3 years. And then they still don't do anything. And then they go get Suzuki. You're like, okay, hell yeah. Surely this means now you're going to go get that other major piece. Because you still, like, every one of their moves, and you alluded to this earlier, is the type of move that should, whether you're going common sense or just if you kind of look at the way the club is constructed, that should precipitate another move or 2, because none of them individually gets you to where you need to be. And none of them, Suzuki is a really, really good fit. I do like that, and I think Stroman's great. But I still am looking at this and going, unless Hoyer and Hawkins have some kind of a big trade up their sleeve. Like, Hoyer sat there and said, our rotation was not good enough. Like, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's close to word for word. We need harder throw. And the Cubs had the slowest rotation, average velocity in baseball, and it's the first time I think since 2016 or 2017 that the rotation averaged under 91 miles an hour. I mean, we're talking like you can't get away with that. I know a lot of people, Kyle Hendricks. Yeah, but you can't have a full rotation that's all under. They're under 91. When the average fastball in Major League Baseball is like 95. I mean, they're way off, and it's obvious they can't beat people with pitching alone. Hoyer said that. And then the problem isn't that they didn't do enough to address that. They did nothing to address it.
Yeah.
Like they haven't even the relievers they've gotten. You're talking about dudes who maybe are around 94, 95. Like it is that's baffling to me because it feels like, I mean, just a complete departure. And like how does that happen? That
leads us into kind of the next topic, which is, it's Brailyn Márquez is back in camp, but more than just Brailyn Márquez being back in camp, it's that the Cubs will probably be relying on the guys that are on the 40-man roster, Scott Effross, Brailyn Márquez, Ethan Roberts, guys like that, that do have, heat in the mid-90s, right?
Effross doesn't.
Okay, but he's I mean, Brailyn and Ethan both are.
Yeah, I mean, Márquez is triple digits, and Ethan's 95 plus.
And so we haven't seen Márquez in a while, and Márquez just got to Arizona after going through another COVID situation, which is it's just baffling. Like the things that have happened around this guy, man, it just feels like he's just never going to come around. That's just the way I look at it. I may be completely off base with it, but there's just it seems like at every turn there's an issue with this guy. And so, I hope there's not. I hope he gets kind of on track. I hope we end up seeing him in spring training. I don't think we will, but who knows? If those guys can come up and, let's say the Cubs are over 500 through June, which I think would be optimistic to say. But if they were, you could see a situation where those guys could come up and actually supplement and maybe be additive to the quality that we're seeing in the pitching staff, and and provide more kind of upside on the power side of things, at least. So you don't know because they're so young, but that could be something, that could be an approach that they're taking. And I mean, here's the thing is that I really think it's going to either be that, or it's going to be the Cubs that are once again well below 500 come the trade deadline. And you're probably going to see them trading away probably Wilson Contreras. I mean, they could trade Stroman, they could trade Madrigal. Who knows, right? I mean, like,
yeah, I mean, I think with Contreras, the thing there, if he doesn't get extended, he's getting traded, right? We know that. We know they've been fielding phone calls.
What kind of value are you going to get from this guy?
Well, and that's where that's where I keep falling back on, and we could say that about the other guys too, that they waited till the deadline, and actually, I mean, all things considered, they extracted pretty good value for the players they traded when they did. Again, when you really break it down, you look at who's in the system now. But to me, it's like, why would you wait if you're not going to extend him? If you're not then you got to move him now, because again, what are you doing with? I mean, you paid Yan Gomes what you did. The idea was to give a backup to Contreras, but to me, it's like, okay, if you're going to pay that money, you want to get the most value out of Contreras, you either trade him now or you extend him now, because you can't go into another situation. Because I think other teams are going to be very wary of that, then going into it and saying, well, what's going on here? How much value do we really want to give these guys? Look at what they're building with the farm now. I mean, maybe you thought about that before, but that part's baffling to me. And I do like Caleb Killian's another one. Got his fastball up. He's upper 90s, right? You do have some hard throwing guys, but Márquez is another one. I do want to touch on that because I've had concerns about him, some of which were alleviated when he really had that breakout, right? Like 2019, he started coming into his own. And a lot of that came from, if you talk to people who were around him at the time, there was a lot of there were some maturity issues that were in play there, 18, 19, where, if it wasn't his day to pitch, he wasn't really concerned with that stuff. He wasn't helping out, kind of tracking pitches for the other guys on the team, really learning how to be a professional pitcher. And that apparently improved. That's my understanding, right? And we saw his performance improve along with it. But then we run into a situation where, hey, stuff breaks up in 2020. He's gone. He's away from the team. He reports back to the alternate facility out of shape, right? Takes him a long time to round back in. The stuff is still electric. It's great, but that is concerning to me. It is also concerning to me, right? Hey, and now we did discover he had myocarditis, right? This inflammation of the muscle there in the heart, or the lining around the muscle. And that can definitely cause some issues. Had to wait some time for that to kind of go away from his first issue with COVID. Then he had the shoulder issues. Then he is COVID again. And I get, like, I'm not telling somebody, hey, you can't go home during these times. And that's, I can't imagine not being there, but it's a little bit interesting to me. And I am ignorant as far as the dynamics of his overall life and how this stuff all worked, right? So I'm not trying to put this on him, but the Cubs ran a really intensive program for their top prospects this winter, had them in camp for an extended period of time, starting in November, and that ran all the way through. And then they had another kind of a really intense, like 2-week kind of camp right before minor league spring training opened. And so I'm kind of wondering, understanding all the issues that had been there in the past, and he'd gone through the COVID issues, and he'd gone through maybe the conditioning issues and not having the best facilities when he was at home to work out. Like, why was that a thing where he was not kind of in camp early? I mean, unless he was, and there was a period in it, and we'll never know all that. I'm a little bit concerned about this. Jed Hoyer said he was supposed to be a pitching weapon. That's his quote. This year, that's what they wanted to use him as. He was going to be on an innings limit because of the very limited throwing that he's done the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But now he's got a late start. So now he pitched one total competitive inning in 2020. He didn't pitch at all last year. And now he's got a very late start on spring training. And what kind of shape is he in? I know the Cubs said they've been checking in on him. Things are good. I just, that is very concerning to me. But maybe this just means that hey, this year's going to be a bullpen year for him, and he can ramp up that much more quickly, and they don't need to worry about stretching him out until next year. But like a Miguel Amaya, you got 2 of your top 3 prospects over the last several years who have gotten frighteningly little time of competitive baseball, and that's concerning.
The biggest concern for me is where you've got a system already that was so weak in terms of producing prospects at the major league level, or being major league ready, and then the guys that were kind of the two of the top guys just kind of seem like they're sputtering out. Now, I mean, it's great that, as you mentioned, all the trades that they made last year, the Cubs made, have built up that prospect system, but it's discouraging because you would have hoped to have seen definitely Márquez. Now, of course, COVID happened, and everything that's gone on with that and what it's done to the season is what it is, right? But it's just, yeah, I'm with you. I'm very concerned about that situation, and
Yeah.
I don't know how much faith. Márquez is still only 23 years old, though, so it's not like he doesn't have a lot of time. I mean, he's got plenty of time to figure this out. But it remains to be seen if he actually becomes a big enough part of the major league team this year. I mean, he's only pitched in one game.
Yeah, he pitched the inning that he threw, against the White Sox, the last game of the 2020 season when he came up. And the funny thing is, like, we're all calling for him. I mean, I was saying it because we had the show going at the time, and I kept saying, like, call him up. Like, what's it going to hurt? You know what I mean? Like, you need.
And that didn't make a lot of sense. Like the timing and how they held him back. It's
right.
like At least we could have had more information, and maybe they were worried about it,
Yeah.
Maybe they were concerned about what they were going to see. And I mean, when he got in there, he, as you would expect.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you're going to
kind
bring
of
like,
wild.
what's the point of bringing him up for the last game when his nerves are going to be high anyway, where he's not
Yeah,
going to
it's
show
like,
you anything?
It's not. Yeah, he's
Right.
not going to be. He's not going to like dominate.
Yeah,
There's no way.
And if he does, that one inning is too small a sample for you to decide, like, yeah, we'll put him on the playoff roster. Not that it would have mattered because they got beat unceremoniously by the Marlins and couldn't score any runs. So I mean, it's like when you're losing 1-0 or 2-1 or whatever, you're not putting in the rookie who's only got one inning of work. So, I'm a little bit. I do not really understand how they've handled his development, although the same could be said for a bunch of different pitchers. So I guess take that for what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about a kid who's lefty, who throws triple digits and has a wipeout slider, and and is still really only learning how to pitch. And I say that because that was the case still in 2019, right? But the biggest issue, and I don't care what level you're at, but by far the biggest issue is just not having experience. You can practice all you want. You can throw all the bullpens you want, have the greatest facility on earth and the greatest coaches, but it doesn't mean a damn thing if you are not out there throwing to live batters with fans in the stands and results that matter and are being tracked as far as I don't care what level it's at, right? There is just, we saw it with Craig Kimbrell. Look what happened there. Oh, he's thrown to a cardboard cutout in his neighbor's barn. Cool. He's in great shape. He's probably squatting 600 pounds based on the size of his thighs and his backside. But then what happened? He got out there. The adrenaline gets pumped up. Things start shifting. You haven't been in that situation. Oh, now my knee is screwed up, because now your body is compensating. Like, it is a different workload, and you cannot properly replicate that in any way, shape, or form, because a competitive pitch thrown in any baseball game is, again, significantly more stressful on your overall being, physical and mental, than any pitch thrown in any simulated circumstance or practice or whatever, right? So that's the part where I get to where it's like, and that's what we talk about spring training. These guys are all in phenomenal shape now. They're not coming in, 30 pounds overweight anymore, but it's the game experience, because the speed of the game, once you're actually playing it all out, is just so different from practice.
Yeah.
It's just, and so not having that with him and Amaya, right? Both just not having those reps, that is a concern. And, you can do all this stuff, man. And let's even take it to Happ. Ian Happ had his elbow cleaned up, right? They think he'll be good to go for the time, but it's tough to know how your arm is going to respond and how your body's going to respond when you're in there again with the adrenaline, with everything going, and how that's going to work. So I hope for the best for him, man. I really do, because I mean that he could be an absolute game changer. Márquez back again.
I mean, seriously, think about it. If he reaches his potential or even comes close to it.
Yeah. Even if it's only in the bullpen, like, it would be great if he were doing that as a starter, but even if it's just as a reliever and a potential closer. I mean, you're talking, again, a lefty, unsavory aspects aside, you're talking about a Aroldis Chapman, a lefty who can throw 100 miles an hour with some wicked breaking stuff coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah, I think we'd all take that at this point.
Yeah,
in time.
like that. There's so much that you could do there. So I mean, hell, having one pitcher who could throw that hard would be great, and they've got a bunch of them coming up. So
yeah, I think that's how we started the conversation, right?
Yeah, just like I just want to have somebody who I can be like, yeah, shit, dude, I trust this guy to come in and get outs. Although, you mentioned him among this group, and he's not a hard thrower, but Efros has looked real good, man. That slider that he talked to us about on the show and what he was trying to do with it, he's made some guys look pretty bad in a couple of occasions here. That slider's look real nice, and I really hope he continues to bring it, because I think if nothing else, then you've got a guy like that who provides a really nice change of pace. The velo isn't real high, but he's got the funky sidearm delivery. So you sandwich that in between a couple of hard throwing guys, especially if you can go kind of lefty righty with it. They can do some really fun stuff with that bullpen, and I'm excited for that. So, hopefully that continues to play, and that's somebody we can root for, because he's a friend of the show. So that's always nice.
So who do you think of the prospects that we know of? Who do you think is going to be? Give me your top 2 or 3 guys that you expect to make the biggest impact in Chicago this season.
I mean, I guess it's low hanging fruit to say Brennan Davis.
It is, but I mean, still, it's true, right?
But yeah, and at the same time, though, I don't think. And I put this out there the other day. I think it would take something very extraordinary for him to break camp with the team. I don't think the Cubs want that, and I know that. Well, I know they don't want that, and it's not. And I know a lot of people. Oh, service time. It's not a service time thing. It's because again, here's a dude who didn't. I mean, he played basketball and baseball in high school. Was drafted out of high school, so he never played in college, and has had some injuries. We saw him get hit in the knee the other day, but he's been hit in the hand a few times. You know, had a broken finger there. So he's missed a bit of time here and there in the minors. He's got very little experience. You know, if you talk about it, and I don't think anybody has said this, but it's been sort of implied with the service time thing. There's kind of a Chris Bryant sort of a comparison, but you got to remember that Bryant played 3 years of college baseball and was named he won the Golden Spikes Award as a junior as the best player, and currently I think holds the record for most home runs with the BB Core bat. Right when they went to the different bat specifications, whether it was like 38, is that what it was? I think his junior year. Anyway, so you know, led college baseball in home runs, college baseball player of the year, minor league player of the year. Very, very different situation from Davis, just in terms of his total reps. Like going back to what I was talking about before.
He was a far more developed player than Davis.
and even then, you know, like there was still a learning curve that took place, and I think Davis could be fine. But I think I think Killian, you know, I already mentioned him. I mean, I think that's a guy who, barring some kind of weird hitch in his development, I mean, he seems like a guy who's, hey, he's a strike thrower who brings it 98. And here's the key. He locates very, very well, or he throws a lot of strikes. That could be a problem if you get to the majors and you're throwing straight fastballs down the dick, and that's how you throw your strikes. But
is he like a sidearm?
No, I don't. I mean, this is like 3/4 maybe, but
he's got like a lower arm slot than most.
Yeah, no, he's not like a big time over the top guy, which is kind of where the knuckle curve comes in, right? Because most over the top guys with their curve are, you know, more the 12-6, kind of a traditional over the top. But and then especially with the knuckle curve, if you depending on, and Craig Kimbrell threw his a little differently, you see some that if they come down a little bit more, there's a little more sweep to it. It's almost like a slider because they're with the way it comes out, instead of being more over the top, it does they get around the corner.
I saw him throwing in the backfields, and it didn't look sidearmish like, you know, the guys that get way down low, but it was definitely a lower arm slot.
Yeah, and I think that aids in his deception. But that's a guy again who I think could come right in. I think Jordan Wicks, right, another one, lefty, high draft pick, college experience. Again, there's very little that they've really got to tinker.
He's so young, though. Do you really expect him to make it to the major league team?
He's not that young. I mean, he played college ball. He's 22, 23.
I know. Well, I'm just saying he was drafted just last year, right?
Yeah. But I think guys like that can move quickly. DJ Hers is another one, you know, who I think that would be a struggle to make that jump, though. Yeah, I mean, I just don't know who's making a real impact. I think there's a bunch of guys who could.
Let me throw one out to you. What about Nelson Velasquez? I mean, he came out and he tore it up out here in the fall league.
Yeah,
and I don't know, that wasn't expected. Like his level of performance and what he did in the fall league, and the fact that he was really in the fall league at all. I don't want to say is a surprise, but you wouldn't have said that this is a guy, you wouldn't have tabbed him as a guy that was going to be in the fall league. And so what he did was really impressive. Like, is this a guy that can come up and make a difference for the Cubs?
I think
it's such a hard call, right? Because
with the DH, I worry a lot about him getting exposed by major league pitching. Here's my thought on him. I think he could very well be a guy who comes up like Schwarber did, and just can mash for a couple weeks before anybody gets a book on him, right, and figures out what's going on. And then once they kind of plot the holes in his swing, then I think you see an adjustment period where he comes back down to earth for a while and has to then go back to the drawing board and figure some of his own stuff out. So, Yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy. Where are we going to see him at? Maybe AAA. Starting out. Like I could see him being one of those dudes who maybe gets a an injury promotion. Somebody else, say it's whether it's Patrick Wisdom or Jason Hayward or somebody at a corner, somebody who's got kind of that maybe they get shifted over, and then Velasquez comes up to DH for a while and kind of serves in that role for a bit. And I could see him getting hot, feasting on some guys who make some mistakes and just pound some. But I'm not sold on him being a real big time impact right away. Next year down the road, I think if he figures some of that stuff out, I think he could be really good.
So I'm sitting here watching the Cubs are playing the Mariners right now, and Hendricks has given up 2 runs early.
Well, that's wonderful.
I don't know if there was an error there. I'm trying to look at the box score right now because it looked like there may have been an error. And I'm not seeing errors. Where is it? This is funky how they have this set up. Yeah, so he's given up 2 runs. He just gave up a hit that almost left the park and ended up in being a double. And I don't think he's got any outs yet. So not a good start.
It's not ideal.
Maybe he's just working on.
I'd be working on stuff. Yeah, which is and that's always the thing with spring training that's difficult because you don't know. They don't generally tell you that ahead of time. But you'll find that afterwards. Like, I was working on a different grip, or hey, I wasn't locating my fastball well the other day, so I was throwing all fastballs. That was it, or I was throwing all changeups, or whatever it is, right? So they might be, or it could just be a deal where he's trying to work a certain location. And then if the hitters get wise to it, then too bad. But the nice thing about it is you're getting those reps, and you don't really care about because at the end of the day, the spring training stats don't matter. So let's hope that's what it is. I'm going to say that's what it is right now. He's working on his curveball, and it wasn't feeling good, and it got tagged a couple times.
There you go. And so far the Cubs don't have any hits, but hopefully that'll change, and we'll see what's going on there. But I just wanted to comment on the fact that, this whole Tom Ricketts or the Ricketts family bid on Chelsea and kind of the optics of that, along with the optics of the sports book that is now being constructed, or the construction that's beginning. I tweeted out a video from Danny Rocket earlier today that showed the dirt being moved around, which is it's just weird seeing that happen. But it's just, you see them spending all this money, and we know it's like you can't take back what has already happened, right? So maybe they can go forward and they can, make amends for kind of what has happened. But what we know has happened is that the Cubs won a World Series. They were very good in 2017 and thought they made the additions that they needed, but weren't able to get to where they needed to get. But they were close enough for anybody. I think you should say that they were close enough. But the years following 17, 18, 19, and 20, they just didn't add where it was obvious they needed to add. And call it whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, they didn't spend enough money. There are guys that they could have added and they didn't. And knowing that, and then seeing, this bid for Chelsea, which is going to be around $4 billion. And granted, it's not cash. So I get it. Listen, you use leverage, and that's what you do. It's a business tactic, and every wealthy business owner uses it. And you have to have cash flow to support a payroll. And there's things like that, and COVID and all these things that happened. But prior to COVID, that's really what I'm talking about is, it just wasn't happening and the revenue was there. And so, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It's just the marquee thing was just a total mess, right? Like where they said they were going to get all this money. It remains so. They didn't get money. And we've talked about this in the past, obviously ad nauseum, but it's so hard to swallow. And if they actually do acquire Chelsea, I feel bad for their fans if they do anything. That's a championship team, right? That's a team that has won championships, is currently the European champions. and they're still in that competition, so they may repeat. Who knows? But that's just, I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, what's your like feeling as a fan, not as like, you know, kind of try to be politically correct?
It's so tough to look at that, right? And when I first saw it, and I'm like less than a novice when it comes to European football, right? Soccer. But if we're talking about a man who in 2020, not even 2 years ago at this point, a year and a half ago, lamented these biblical losses. He'll never ever live that down. And it's funny too, because a lot of like, and there's somebody on my Twitter who's right now trying to be like, well, benefit of the doubt and every loss. Is like, nah, that wasn't just a slip of the tongue, because he's talked about dead weight losses from the luxury tax to get down there. And the payroll was high in the post 2016 years, primarily because they loaded up on it was Yu Darvish, and they still had Jason Hayward's contract, they still had John Lester's contract. And that's when they added Darvish and Chatwood and Brandon Morrow. So a lot of that got inflated because of those deals they signed there. But then it clearly dropped off, right? And there's been this very obvious move to change. And again, I understand, and this is something I wrote about as well. So if you want to go read about that stuff and all the Chelsea things that are out there, the family's still got money, right? So this isn't like, I know they are the Cubs owners, but it's not as if it's like Tom Ricketts. Like Joe has to be behind this to some extent. And they're partnered with Ken What's His Nuts, you know, the hedge fund guy who's like, he makes Sinclair look like good guys. It's kind of my understanding of it, you know, and so to what extent, you know, this is like the cachet of the Ricketts. Like, it's not as if Tom Ricketts is in there writing a check for $4 billion out of his personal account, right? So I want to make sure that's there, but it is very, very difficult to repeat what you said. The optics are bad because you're sitting here talking about how professional sports ownership, baseball ownership is so difficult. The revenue's not good. Oh gosh, it's all this. And then you're out there buying a European soccer club for $4 billion, which is more valuable than your own team, which has more than quadrupled in value, or roughly quadrupled in value since you got it. It is, and then to say, you know, to look at what the Cubs have done and to have dialed back on payroll and to have not spent like the Yankees or the Dodgers or some of these other clubs, right, recently. And those and the Yankees might be dialing back a little bit, but they're still going out doing some things. But these teams, you know, or the Phillies, even hell, the Mets, right? There's a lot of teams. I mean, John Middleton and the Phillies said flat out, like, he's going over the CBT to go get Nick Castellanos. Oh, who else did he sign? Oh, Kyle Schwarber. Lo and behold, two former Cubs who people wanted the Cubs to bring back. You know, so if you look at like how the Phillies are operating versus the Cubs do not look like they're spending to win. Right. And again, we go back to that. They're spending money.
They really haven't looked like they were spending to win for 5 years.
Right. Well, since I would say, 19 or 18, they signed Darvish, and that felt like that.
Yeah, but was
after that. But they didn't.
There were more holes there that needed to be filled than just Darvish.
And I guess that, excuse me, that's the problem is the guys that they're signing now, you know, out Suzuki and Stroman are big time signings regardless. Everybody else they're getting, VR in particular, those are players that you should be signing to complement an otherwise fully fleshed out. Man, I can't even talk. Like, something's happening to my voice here. A fully fleshed out roster that's ready to win, that you need competent backups and bullpen pitchers and that sort of thing. And so when you're out here saying,
they're filling a team of guys that are just, you know, complementary pieces that are the guys that we needed back in, you know, 17, 18.
They're fielding the role players. Their team now is the role players they needed to have 5 years ago when they were struggling to repeat.
Mix the two.
Yeah. And that's it. It's just so funny though to see that happen, right? You're saying, well, okay, like I get it. And I think for a lot of these people, like, soccer is a passion And we've talked about this too before, though. These major sports teams like this is a way. There's ego that's involved. There's status that's involved. This isn't just a matter of buying another sports team or whatever for whatever reason. This is absolutely like the equivalent of a midlife crisis and dude going out and buying a sports car, but for billionaires. Because if you want to rub elbows with the global elite, the Cubs don't necessarily get that done on a global scale. The Cubs are great for American politicians and American wealthy, oligarchs in the sense that we have them here. And that's cool. But if you really want to step it up and if you really want to start getting yourself into some big time stuff, bam, there you go. Go buy yourself a championship football club, because that now opens things up to a much more global prestige. And I think that's what you see with these folks, is that if we can get into it on this, it opens other doors. I mean, you're talking about it was owned by a Russian oligarch, right? Like if that's the sandbox you're playing in. That's that's a whole different sandbox from what you normally deal with these like oil barons and old timey real estate, monarch people, whatever we want to say. That's like a platinum spoon at that point. And so I think there's a lot more to it than just spending that money, which again, the optics are yet again. And I think as we've learned with the deal they did with Sinclair, with other things they've done, the way that Marquee got set up, with the things they've done business wise and changes, they could give a shit less about the optics of the situation.
The way they basically went after all the rooftop owners.
Personally,
they tried to get them arrested.
Yeah, well, and they tried to. My understanding, I've heard stories about trying to have loans called in, and gee, do you think somebody who owned TD Ameritrade might have connections in the financial world and know people who are involved in some corporate real estate and mortgages and things like that? But I mean, if you think it was just a matter of the Ricketts is going to rooftop owners with a fair market value deal and just saying, hey, would you mind selling this to us? You're dead wrong. They absolutely went in there and tried to tank some of those businesses. I mean, and that's, I'm not saying I know that whatever. It's out there.
We're pretty sure. Yeah. This isn't news. We're not breaking anything here.
Yeah. And I mean, there was a reason they got sued, and there was a reason that all this stuff went back and forth. Right. So it is wild to see this happening in light of all these other things. It's like, you got $4 billion over here, but you can't spend another $50 million over on this side. Like, that feels weird, even if they are, realistically entirely different pools of money and with very different people involved in them. But it is just look at the company they keep and the business decisions that are being made, to where I think a lot of people feel lied to, because they bought, and understandably so, the line about Tom meeting his wife in the bleachers and, oh, this is a family business and we want to run this and be good stewards in the community and blah, 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 blah.
Which is code for we want to own everything in and around Wrigley.
Yeah, we want to own the neighborhood, running however the hell we please, and you look at how they try to run out the aldermen and run campaigns against them, smear campaigns, and like openly basically have political commercials on their appearances on 670 The Score, things like that. And it's just, oh man, there's just a lot more unfortunate things that have sort of come out of that you just like, all right, cool. Now you got a new toy. Can you maybe sell the old one? Like, donate that to Goodwill or something, so another kid who needs it more can buy, as if a billionaire needs to go shop at Goodwill, right? But like, can you maybe just go work on that toy now and leave this to someone? But if that were the case, if it were really a losing business, they'd be more than happy to sell the Cubs and get the hell out of that sinkhole of an investment. But I'm reasonably sure they don't want to sell, because I'm reasonably sure it's actually a very good investment for them in the long run.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Well, I mean, it protects, this generational wealth, essentially. Listen, I look at it investing, and I know, when the lockout was going on, Manfred tried to make it seem like owning a baseball team was a risky investment. I challenge you to tell me when the last time a baseball team failed financially. I mean, now granted, the Marlins is probably as close as you're going to be able to get, because the Marlins has actually lost value from when they were purchased. I'd have to look at the date when they were purchased, but
It's only like 5 years ago.
That's really the only
years.
franchise. But MLB has the ability to move teams, right?
Yeah.
Like they moved the Expos. They actually bought the Expos from the owner, I believe, and then they moved them to Washington, and now that Washington Nationals team is worth way more than it was worth. So they have the ability to move a team, and so that's, again, they've got this monopoly, this antitrust protection, which restricts owners from moving teams, but Major League Baseball, if they want to, can move teams. And so, just their ability to be a really, really what I consider to be a risk-free. I mean, maybe it's not risk-free. Maybe it's not like US T-bill 10-year United States Treasury kind of risk-free when you think of risk-free backed by the government type thing, but it's close. And it's close.
Do you get major tax write-offs for having a T-bill?
You not like owning an MLB team.
Can you write off the depreciation of different things? Can you get a federal landmark status and save yourself $50 million in federal taxes?
Exactly.
I mean,
so that's just the thing when it comes to it. This is protecting generational wealth. This is preserving generational wealth, and we get it. It's just like, just be honest with us, though. I mean, but don't try to make us. Don't sit there as the commissioner of baseball and tell us that you brought in some investment bankers who did an analysis. Yeah. And that they said that you would have been better off, investing your money in the stock market, because it's just not true. The risk of investing in the stock market is way higher than the risk associated with investing in a baseball team. And so there's a trade-off there in terms of the interest rate. You can't compare those. It's not apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think the answer to my question is the optics of this is just a bad thing, and it'd be better if at least they had re-signed Chris Bryant, for example, or Anthony Rizzo, or anybody. It would have been better if they wouldn't have cut Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that they could have done, and I do want to address this because a question came up, and I want to. Well, it's not even pivoting that hard, because when we talked about an abject failure to do anything about needing hard throwing pitchers. There's also been an abject failure when it comes to addressing their left-handed power needs, and they haven't done anything there. And we did have a question in the comments come in about Michael Conforto, who's really the only left-handed power bat that's out there. And here's the issue. So I wrote about this primarily in regards to Carlos Correa, but Conforto is actually even more impacted by it. And there's a reason. So here's the thing with Correa is the deal that he signed. I wanted the Cubs to get him. I mean, we've talked about it on here forever. I've written about it multiple times. I wanted them to sign him, throw $350 million at him for 10 years. Do it. I don't care. But when I saw the deal he got with the Twins, I'm glad the Cubs didn't do that, because that doesn't really serve their needs. Yes, it might pump people up for a year, but if he opts out after a year, what are you left with? And the problem is, what we really need to take into account is a qualifying offer. They give that up. And here's the issue, and I had honestly not thought about this initially. The bigger issue, in addition to all these other things, is not just the qualifying offer that you lose a draft pick, right? Which is, it'd be one thing if we're talking about 10 years of that guy being there. If you're talking about losing a draft pick for 1 year of a player, that's a little bit hard to swallow. And you can't QO, you might not be able to QO him after he leaves, because if they figure everything out in the international draft, the qualifying offer system goes away. The other issue is that a team's bonus pool for the amateur draft is determined by where they slot in that draft and how many spots they have in it. So for the Cubs, losing the number 7 pick in the second round would represent a slot value of around $1.5 million, $2 million, somewhere in there. I don't know where it's going to fall, but they lose that out of their pool, which is maybe even more detrimental than losing the pick itself, because they can't really go over slot on additional players. Think about James Triantos, who they signed, who his slot value, I think he was number 56 overall in the second round. His slot value was only $1.2 million. They paid him $2.1. That extra $900,000 bought him out of his commitment to the University of North Carolina. That's where they're able to get him. He's one of their top hitting prospects now. And so if you lose both that pick and a couple $1 million in slot money, all of a sudden you're looking at really handcuffing yourself. And so when it comes to, hopefully those guys will mature, and maybe Correa, brings him up for a year. But if he opts out, you end up getting stuck with a lot there. There's some big. The Cubs value that. This is based on Patrick Mooney's reporting, and it makes sense. So they value that pick and the slot money and everything else all in at about $20 million. So if Correa leaves after a year, all of a sudden you're looking at apparently about $55 million between his salary and the value of the pick and the other losses that you have there. So let's apply that to Michael Conforto. Is Conforto as impactful a player as Carlos Correa? I think we can all agree the answer is no. So
not.
He's not going to command nearly as much of a salary either, but you're still giving up the exact same value in terms of the pick and the pool money, the slot money, because of the qualifying offer. So to do that, to sign a guy who's not going to have nearly as much impact, who you might sign for 3 years, now you're talking about the value of what you give up is so much greater relative to the value that he provides.
It's not happening. The Cubs are not giving away any picks. I mean, if there's anything, they would like to have more picks.
Yeah,
which
not for that. Not now. If they were to have signed Correa for 10 years, I could see them adding a Conforto, to be honest with you, because you've already given up the pick, and now you're looking at like, okay, we don't need the picks because this guy's going to be here for 10 years. We're not as worried about that pick now because we have this player locked in. But if you're talking about 2 or 3 years, that becomes, it's so difficult then to recoup that value in the way that they view it, right? I'm not saying you need to agree with that, anybody else out there, but it just doesn't make as much sense. But yeah, I mean, but it does here. The one thing I'll close with, maybe, unless you want to keep going into some other things, I do like that we've seen, and that, I got into it with somebody the other day too. It happens to me a lot on Twitter, especially after a couple beers, but who was like, saying about how the Cubs never do a certain thing, or it's something with their business practices, right? And they always hold on to people too long. They always do this. I said, you realize Theo Epstein's not in charge anymore, right? Well, same regime. And first of all, no, it's not, because there's been a lot of turnover in that front office, period.
Yeah.
And the whole reason that Theo left, like a stated reason, was that hard decisions had to be made. He didn't want to be the one to make them with a year left. I don't think he was the one that could make them, and I think Jed could. And we're already seeing a difference in the way they do things, because guess what? Seiya Suzuki got a no trade clause. That's something Chris Bryant wanted, but they wouldn't give it to him before. They wouldn't do that for anybody. They gave a partial to Jason Hayward, after which he got his 10-5 rights, and Bryant would have had 10-5 rights as well. But the real key there is, you look at this a couple different ways. So now Bryant got all his he got $60 more million or so from the Cubs. He gets 180 some from the Rockies, and he's got his no trade. Granted, it won't matter in the last year because he'll have his 10-5, after 5 years, and he would have had that with the Cubs. But the point is more, I think, about that security that you've got there to lock that in, to say, hey, this is something that I want. If you're not going to give that to me out of principle, that seems really odd to me. I'm just thinking of that myself. But the nice thing about it, and some people think that he's going to try to like leverage his way out of Colorado. That's not something Bryant would do. But if the Rockies run into a similar situation as what they did with Nolan Arenado, and they want to cut their money again and do all that, Bryant has full control over where he goes at that point. If they say, hey, we might need to move you, or we're thinking this has to happen, then he can be like, that's cool, but you got to come through me first. They can't just move him to wherever they want.
Yeah.
So that's my last thing, is that I like that we're seeing something different. That no trade clause being given to Suzuki is a sign to me, first of all, that obviously they intend to keep the guy around. Just kind of have to. But that business is being done differently now under Jed Hoyer and a new front office than what it was under Theo Epstein. And I think that says good things for their ability to be a little bit more nimble in the moment. I think with Epstein, he got too attached emotionally, maybe, or we've discussed it. I don't need to go into that too much more, but that was one of their failings, is just holding on and then continuing to trust the same group over and over to make the changes that they've proven a couple times before that they weren't going to be able to make. And that, hey, maybe you should go out and figure out how the hell to put players around them to complement those gaps. So anyway.
kind of baffling, but kind of we are where we are, I guess, right? And so you got to kind of just hope for the best. Which I think, to be honest with you, the game that the Cubs are playing here, what they're trying to do, and how they're trying to set this up with the prospects they've got in their system, they haven't screwed anything up. Let's put it that way. Now the prospects have to pan out. Of course they do. No, that's still TBD, but so far they haven't screwed it up, right?
Yeah, not yet.
So,
we'll see.
Give them some time. So, anyways, you'll be coming out here in a couple of days, as we were saying, and heck, maybe we'll even do a live broadcast of this show from, I don't know, maybe from Sloan, from my house,
we tried that from Sloan. We tried that from Sloan last year, and it
we had to sit away from each other.
Yeah, and we had to keep the masks on and do all that whole thing.
Yeah, that's okay. So I think my mind just got rid of all that.
They didn't work as well as what we had hoped. But hey, maybe we could do that from as long as it's not windy. It gets windy and you're on a phone and the pickup is bad. But
we could always just do it from the house too. So
yeah, we could do that, or we could do a quick live remote from like the Club 400 tent. We can just grab some players like as they're coming by, just live on the show.
That could be fun, actually. Yeah, maybe we'll try to do that on Friday.
Yeah, maybe we do like a real one, like a short hit beforehand, so we can kind of have something that's out there, and then we can go back there and have a little fun with it.
Absolutely. So be on the lookout for that. And until then, you guys stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you soon.